Hey everybody, I'm Aaron Simmons. This is Philosophy for Where We Find Ourselves, March 27th, 2023. A new newsletter is coming out over at my website, jaronsimmons.com, so please make sure that you have gotten signed up and subscribed there. It will be out on the 1st of April, and it will not be a fool's joke, but please do get signed up so that you can make sure not to miss that exclusive content coming there. The last couple weeks, we've been talking about the philosophy of Emmanuel Levinas and his idea that ethics is first philosophy. It goes deeper than ontology, deeper than egoism. And then we looked at the way that this infinite demand of ethics stands in tension with the practical requirements of our political lives. And by politics, Levinas just means the fact of multiple others. There is always the third person. Today, I want to look at three sort of camps of objections to this Levinasian project in order to consider what I take to be the biggest worries that this Levinasian project maybe invites. The first one comes from Simon Critchley, and this is the idea that Levinasian ethics invites quietism or resignation. The idea is pretty simple. If it turns out that we can't ever do enough to be good, we can't ultimately discharge our moral obligations, then why even bother trying? Let's just be focused on ourselves. Let's give in to egoism. Let's, get our own things taken care of and stop worrying about everybody else, because no matter how much we do, we haven't done enough. The second objection comes from David Wood, and this is an objection about the very logic or fabric by which the Levinasian idea begins. For Wood, this is ultimately just a different version of Thomas Hobbes's idea of a war of all against all. So for Wood, rather than Levinas overcoming ontology, Levinasian ontology just is this Hobbesian battle for supremacy. And so ethics has to step in as a kind of taming of that wildness at the heart of human existence, our desire to displace the other. The third objection comes from Richard Rorty, and I've also heard it defended by John Locke. This is the idea that ultimately Levinasian ethics is just too abstract. It misses the boat of what ethical life is all about, and that is making tomorrow a little bit better than today for as many people as we can. It's about minimizing suffering. It's about maximizing flourishing. It's about doing what I can in relation to those that I encounter and being pragmatic about it. I don't stay up at night wrestling with insomnia, overwhelmed by the infinity of my obligation. I do what I can in response to those that I encounter, and that's okay. Now look, these three objections are all serious. Critchley's worry about resignation is actually a worry about the idea that we are the kinds of people, the kinds of beings who really do benefit from having accomplishable tasks. Motivational speakers have made livings off of this idea. Here are 5 things you can do today in order to get where you want to be tomorrow. Levinas rejects that whole project. Levinas says, nope, no matter what you do, it's not enough. But I think here that Levinas is working at a level that we've got to rethink. In other words, we tend to assume that the task of human existence is a matter of success. It's a matter of achieving certain things, of externally recognizable goal setting. Levinas comes in and says, no. Let's reorient ourselves towards a kind of faithfulness logic. It's the way in which we are oriented and that we risk ourselves and we give all we've got. This is what defines our life, not just achieving certain things. So imagine you were tasked with running an infinite marathon. Well, you're not going to pull it off. The question is, will you just sit down and not even try, or will you be the sort of person who runs as hard as you can for as long as possible? It's that latter kind of good that Levinas wants to cultivate. Faithfulness in moral life rather than success in having been moral. When it comes to David Wood's objection about this Hobbesian battle of all against all, here I think Levinas actually rejects that problematic ontology with his suggestion that our very identity is constituted by responsibility, not that responsibility comes in as a check on our initial inclinations. So when the other says, don't kill me, this isn't because we start with a desire to kill the other, start with this violence. It's instead because we are so easily tempted by the egoism that would assert our own goods over the other. And that don't kill me reminder stands as a constant check on the temptation to a war of all against all, rather than that war being foundational. And finally, and I think the most important, how do we then put this stuff in practice? Isn't it too abstract? Richard Rorty and John Locke both say we should be pragmatic about moral life, not this complicated, radical, phenomenological approach that Levinas offers. Here, I think we just bite the bullet and we say, yep, at the end of the day, we've got to realize that unless we are also going to be pragmatic about our moral practices, our social policies, our public lives, that we will fail to be faithful to the constancy of the ethical task. In other words, I don't think that Levinas and Rorty are ultimately at odds. Levinas gives us a radical account of why it matters always to be so pragmatically concerned. The worry with Rorty is that it can lead to a kind of complacency. I've done enough. I'm good. I'm going to take some days off from moral living. Well, that's a thing that Levinas fundamentally rejects. We don't get an escape from obligation, an escape from responsibility, but we do, and this is the brilliance of his idea of politics, we do have to recognize that there's only so much we can ever do in the face of a particular situation, a particular circumstance. So in political decisions, we must be pragmatic. We just shouldn't think that that pragmatic decision is all there is to say about moral life in the first place. Ultimately, all of these objections are weighty, they're important, and we've got to take them seriously. I actually think that we can learn something here about broader social discourse. Far too often, we tend to think that we only have to see the faces of those people who agree with me politically or agree with me about some fundamental issue. Levinasian ethics, their radicality is that we have to see the faces of the people who we think are wrong about moral life, who are fundamentally misguided about justice, who misunderstand what it looks like to live in the right way. That disagreement does not occlude their face. The moral demand remains. And the way I think that a lot of this should play out for us is being able to recognize that we see faces when we are able to listen to voices. Can I hear the voice of the other even when I think that they're wrong? Or am I dismissing them? Am I excluding them? Am I rejecting them? This is a complicated and difficult idea, but it's one that I think is extremely important in a world increasingly divided. Levinas doesn't tell us not to disagree, not to take objections seriously, not to respond with fervor and rigor to objections and to models of injustice. He thinks that that's required of us as moral agents in a world of multiple others. But he also thinks that we far too often can limit our moral universe just to the other people like us, the people that we hope are right. Maybe if we take Levinas seriously and hear these objections to him, we are better able to realize all of us have work to do. Moral life is hard. Social life is difficult. And being able to engage with others is a complicated task that is not just a matter of social discourse and rhetoric, but it's also fundamentally about who we are and how we understand ourselves in relation to every other. I hope you've enjoyed these few weeks. If you've got questions about Levinas, drop them in the comments. I'll do my best to respond. If you've got suggestions for other videos, I'd love to hear them. I'll see you next time, unless a piano falls on our heads.